All right, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome to noise music that you can punch walls and fight cops to. My name is gluexsniffer. We've got a very good episode for you today. I sat down across the internet with Audrey Trench, who records under the moniker PISS FETISH. So we'll be listening to my conversation with her. And then we'll be listening to her album, The Cutting Room Floor Volume 1. So first, let's start off with the interview. All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is gluexsniffer, and today I'm sitting down, metaphorically, across the internet, but still sitting down, with PISS FETISH out of Columbus. Say hello to the people.
Hey, I also go by Audrey Trench, but hell yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I knew that, and I dropped the ball, so don't call me out on my own show. So that just made me sound like an asshole. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I guess I am now a noise artist based out of Columbus, Ohio, and I kind of do some like power electronics, first noise wall, what my friend Eric from Misanthropic Vendetta and I call violent harsh noise, and I guess like blackened harsh noise as well. I played in some bands around here. I was most recently I did a project with some friends called Crime Light. I think that tape comes out on July 16th or 15th. And I have production credits on that. I wrote some of the songs and I played drums on it. So I do a lot of different stuff, but mostly focused on this thing. And yeah, that's the bulk of it.
So, so I would say that if you go to the Piss Fetish Bandcamp, it's pretty unmistakable that there is a political leaning to what you're putting out. So, what sort of parallels do you draw between what your philosophy is and the type of music that you're doing?
Okay, hell yeah. So I am deeply political. I am a hardcore leftist with some pretty radical ideas about the economy and a good hefty dose of anarchism. If those words scare you, just turn off the interview now. I think that like harsh noise and experimental music at the end of the day are an underutilized form of protest. And the reason that I say that is because it's belligerent, obnoxious, annoying, and you have to be a little fucked up to be like into it at the end of the day, which are all these beautiful things. And I think that it plays so well with politics because of the imagery that has kind of been cultivated. And I try and stay away from the like black and white fucking edgy covers and stuff. Because I'm really not like that. I'm just like queer goober. So like I'm not trying to be tough at the end of the day. But I think that it's okay to be like a little edgy about it. But I think there's a really good through line between noise and politics because noise typically gives you a lot of reading material at the end of the day. I think a lot of people draw from some really good sources with the inspiration for like overarching ideas and stuff, whether it be like commentary about like queer stuff, which is automatically political because people want to know what's in my pants, or like like Misery Engine is fucking so cool. What a cool project about like class consciousness and like class war and all of that stuff. And but that doesn't go to say that there's not like Nazis and stuff, because there totally is, which is like one of my issues with that. And I think we need to be better as a community at regulating that.
Yeah,
But in essence, I think there's
that was a pretty common thread that would that would that would often pop up in like early power electronic stuff that came out of Europe primarily.
Yeah, like, and I also unfortunately am really into like black metal, so like seeding out the bad sides of that is something that you kind of come to like get good at and be aware of. And I guess I would identify as an anti-fascist, so I have my eyes on the right in a healthy way to see what their dog whistles are and stuff. So I think that just due to the nature of the thing, you really have to be aware of those sorts of things and make sure that what you're involved in is not bad. Because it's unfortunately that is a component of the scene.
Yeah,
But
you don't
if
want to
I'm
wear a
louder than
shirt.
them, then fuck
Yeah, you don't want to buy a shirt from a band and then 2 months later find out that they've been running around promoting their fascist shit.
exactly, and it happens all too often. It's really unfortunate that that's the case, but we can police our own community. We don't need someone to do it for us. We just need to do a better job.
Fair enough. So something that you alluded to actually while you were talking was the idea that you kind of have to be a little fucked up to sort of be into noise. I would almost. What are your thoughts on the idea of people like of using noise as a way to identify somebody that is generally more self-aware? Because I think the difference between people who are into noise and people who think it's the dumbest thing in the world, I don't think it has to do with they're actually hearing, because everybody's hearing the same thing. You're literally hearing what we call a wall of noise. But for somebody that completely dismisses noise, that can kind of that might indicate some inability or some lack of self-awareness of something outside of what they understand. So what are your thoughts on noise being a tool to sort of identify somebody that is more willing to accept or look into what they don't understand?
I think a little more like pointed way to put it would be that noise, and particularly like the Vaumier like school of thought with noise, which I don't totally subscribe to, but I totally get where he's coming from, is that it necessitates introspection. And like the reason that that's the case, I do okay. I'm gonna go a little all over the place and then narrow down.
Go
So
for it.
the way that I use noise as a tool in my everyday life is I put it on and I typically will meditate to it, and I mean interpret that however you want, with whether it's like the Levian like decompression chamber or like like some more like Eastern mysticism way. I use it in that kind of fashion to kind of turn the synapses down a little bit. And I think that the nature of that overlaps with not intelligence, because like intelligence is not something that is objective or like quantifiable at the end of the day. I do think that there is a self-awareness to noise, and it necessitates that, and it overlaps a lot as well with like a lot of my trans femme friends who also have loud, noisy brains, and I think that like that is a lot of self-awareness at the end of the day that you're constantly aware of, and it's nice to be able to like turn that stuff down is kind of how I treat it. So without getting too philosophical about it, I think that there is something there for that, and I do think that a lot of people just don't realize that noise is a really healthy way of turning that stuff down, because everybody has like their thing. Like I also like smoking weed, so like that is a thing that I use to turn my brain down. But other people will like scroll through Facebook all day or scroll through Twitter all day or like scroll through CNN all day. Like we all have our kind of things that we do, and I really think that like in terms of good outlets for turning off the noise, well, I guess yeah, you're just adding noise to it, but when in doubt. Yeah, I do think it necessitates self-awareness and a lot of creativity, because like I can sit down and put a wall on and not hear the same part twice because my brain will fill in the gaps. And I know Vamier has talked about that a lot, and I definitely think that there's a lot of room to let your mind wander in a healthy way, not in an anxious, like paranoid way, but in like a contained sort of environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. The I think that it does take that that bit of self-awareness to really pull something out of noise, whatever it happens to be for you specifically. But I also think that it's a good exercise in using using your decompression time in a way that exists within yourself and doesn't point that attention outwards. Like you said, um, people that kind of just doom scroll all day long, yeah, they're kind of doing the same thing where they're turning their brains off, but they're turning their brains off in a way that takes them outside of themselves and it takes their attention and focus outwards. And I feel like that's where a lot of the energy that could be used for better things gets lost.
I think that is it. I literally was just listening all day at work to this podcast about like Kant versus Hume, and I think that there's something in there that I couldn't quite articulate because I'm not smart enough, but it's a little bit chicken or the egg. But I do think that there's a healthy environment to do that in. Absolutely, yeah. Because I don't think that I don't know. Noise just feels good too. Like as someone who has always loved texture and uh I really love installation art too, because it's like it's very present. It's not like just looking at a painting or anything. Like you're in the space that the artist intended, and I think that but audibly is like beautiful as well. So there's some overlap there. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's like a really good playground for yourself.
Yeah, and I think I I'm kind of going to exercise some self-awareness here. I understand that what everything that we've said so far kind of makes it seem like we're putting noise up on this pedestal as this super important and super encompassingly meditative thing, but I feel like a lot of us within this kind of community also have the self-awareness to know that for someone that doesn't like this stuff or doesn't get it, we know what it sounds like. We have the awareness that we can make fun of ourselves too. Like we don't have to take noise as seriously as it kind of sounds like we just said you do.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that definitely needs to be brought up. I tried to forego that point. But yeah, I do think that I mean, I joke about it all the fucking time. I literally will make jokes about how, like, I'm going to go make noises. Like, I know that. I know it's absurd. It's so fucking absurd to sit in my house and twiddle knobs and be dissatisfied with it until I'm satisfied with it. Like, that's fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
No, people don't normally do that. Like, if you're normally mixing something or like editing something, it's usually like some sort of what we would consider a coherent song or like piece. And this is, I mean, there's still pieces. It's just a lot of fucked up pieces that you put together in such a way that it tickles your brain the right way. So I know that it's crazy. Like, I totally know that. You got to be a little wonky to be like, oh yeah, I like the noises. Like,
But I know exactly what you mean. And it's almost, I guess, one of the best ways to describe like what we get out of noise is it's the most aggressive asthma you can imagine.
oh my god, yeah, like unequivocally. Like I love. Okay, every almost every band I've been in, I've been anti noise gate, which is like, of course, fucking hilarious because it's like, of course, you think noise gates are stupid, but I have like those little moments of like guitar feedback that you get in a set can be like momentous, like so perfect.
Oh
There
yeah.
is so much there that you can set free by not having a fucking noise gate on, and it's like dimensional. It adds the extra dimension to it because you're not going from this scrubbed sound into like, all right, it sounds fucking like the record. Like who the fuck cares? But if there's a rest and you can let that feedback note come through, you got me fucking hooked. I am there.
You're a poser if you use a noise gate, unfortunately.
The guy from Lone Wolf Effects, who I think is a transphobe, so I'm not gonna like. I'm pretty sure that that's a thing that happened. Regardless, he calls it Sears metal when you use a noise gate, and I love that because it's like, oh my god, it's fucking Sears metal. It's fucking manufactured. You programmed all your drums. Nobody played that shit. Like, it's way too clean. Like, fucking record a demo in your basement with a Shure SM57 and be about it. Like, who the fuck cares if you spent $1,000 on your guitar tone? I fucking don't. If your songs aren't good, it doesn't fucking.
See, I absolutely love calling it Sears metal. My brain immediately filled it into Sears core, but
Yeah.
I also really like the idea though of looking at Sears core as like the equivalent to like doping for the Olympics. Like the Olympics is like, no, you can't use any performance enhancing substances. But they should have a separate league for 100% for doping. Like if this is what you're going to do it the hardest. So there should be an embrace of Sears core to be the most absurdly expensive and polished thing ever, to the point where it becomes like completely anti-noise.
I'm into that. I would get behind that as a movement. Like if you're gonna make it, cyber grind is arguably that because it's all computers. And I'm not shitting on cyber grind. Like I put out a cyber grind track. I tried it. I gave it a shot. It's like it's cool to see how far you can like kind of push the computer. But yeah, if you're gonna go all in and have the computer do all of it.
Well,
Fuck it.
that reminds me of do you know what extra tone is?
I cannot say I'm hip to that.
So, extra tone is a genre of electronic music that entirely predicates itself on having a BPM that is above 1000, to the point where the kick drums become indistinguishable and it becomes one entire tone.
See, I could get really into that. I
Yeah.
could get really into that. That's the shit I'm talking about. Like, I don't see anything wrong with pushing the computer as far as it'll go. There is no reason. Like, that's literally what I do in analog form with pedals and synth stuff. Is the same thing. Is just try and fucking fry it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look into this.
Yeah, you gotta. So if that's what you're going for, you gotta look into extra tone, and you gotta look into the concept of black MIDI.
Like the band?
No. Black MIDI named themselves after the idea of black MIDI, and the idea of black MIDI is that people will write tracks and people will use like MIDI files, like electronic recordings, and they will make like the musical notation so dense that it just becomes one flat black bar.
I love this. I love people. They're so cool.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how I would never would have thought of that.
Yeah, so people will like, and then there's like this weird element of like braggadocio to it, where people are like, "Oh yeah, my computer can play this without skipping," or which is fun. Like there's a fun braggadocio element, but it's almost more fun to watch people's computers just completely like vomit over not being able to process all these notes.
I love that. I love the nerd overlap of electronic music like so much. It's one of my favorite things.
Oh, it's the best. So before I forget, we were talking for a little bit before I actually started this interview, and I put a pin in what we were talking about, and I can't think of a natural way to segue into it. So I'm just gonna cut abruptly into it, but retell the story of, you said you were at the gas station buying like a Red Bull or something.
Yeah, okay. I love Formula One. Red Bull's my team, so I was buying a Red Bull. That's we just have to set that straight. Yeah. So, which is again nerdy tech bullshit that I'm into. But I went on a Saturday to go get a Red Bull from the gas station down the road from my house, and I live by the Ohio State University on campus, like effectively on campus. There were these kids that were partying like across the street from the gas station I was in, and I walked up to the counter and I put the Red Bull on the thing, and the kid behind the counter was like, the kids were listening to like normal like dance electronic music, like nothing bizarre. And the kid behind the counter was like, he said some bullshit about how they're not listening to like real music, or like real music doesn't exist anymore. And like, I visibly do not look like somebody that you should like say that to, because I'm always wearing like weird band t-shirts. Like, I was probably wearing a Year Twins shirt, which shout out to those guys because they're great and they're from Columbus and they're like Sunny Day Real Estate but better, and I love Sunny Day Real Estate. But regardless, he said like good music doesn't exist anymore. And I just looked at him and I was like, who gives you the fucking right to like say that? Like, you're not going out of your way to search for anything at this point. Like, if you go to Bandcamp and type in your favorite genre and listen to like anything that comes up, you're probably going to be like, damn, I never would have known that this band from like Montreal or like St. Paul or some bullshit is like exists, because you're just listening to the top 40, and like that's your fault. Like, I'm not gonna validate your fucking dadcore bro dad bullshit by being like, you're totally right. Like, Bruce Springsteen was the pinnacle of rock and roll. Like, fuck you. That's fucking so stupid. Like, shit is allowed to exist, and new shit is also allowed to exist. Like, it does not invalidate Nine Inch Nails by some kid in fucking Toledo putting out an industrial album that sounds kind of vaguely like Pretty Hate Machine, but with distortion all over it. Like, that doesn't invalidate it. Just because Pretty Hate Machine is a good album does not mean that this kid did not make something that could potentially be better in this hypothetical. I just fucking hate that perspective where people bitch about stupid bullshit when it's like, if you fucking took any time to appreciate the same art that you're complaining about, you would be better off. And yet you want to bitch about it. I hate it. Nothing grinds my gears more than that.
Well, it's the entire idea that people want the matter to have been decided already, because they can say that, oh yeah, there's nothing out there that was like you said, like Bruce, which is hilarious because I love Bruce Springsteen, but
me too.
But yeah, so but it's the idea that people want it to have been decided for them, or decided already, because then if they reject this pop music but they still subscribe to music that already exists, they can put themselves in the camp of being like an aficionado or like an expert on music, simply because they reject whatever pop canon, but they're subscribing to just their side of the pop canon. And I think that's probably the biggest enemy to the idea of creating an environment or a world where it's much more feasible to create new music and new art.
Unequivocally, it's okay. So I love like French philosophy, as if nobody got that from anything before. I love existentialism and absurdism and shit. And applying my favorite Albert Camus quote to art is kind of why the PISS Fetish project exists. My favorite thing he's ever said is, "For if there is a sin against this life, it's wishing that there was another." And I think about this all the fucking time. And there's a great documentary that I watched when I was way too young called Flight from Death. And it's escaping me right now, the quote from the movie, but it's about like It's these like professors and scientist people that like get together and fuck, it's escaping me. Damn it, we can cut this out. But like, it's so good. Regardless, the idea is that you shouldn't waste what you have now, because I mean, this is like, you get one fucking go around, so you might as well make your contribution. And what I joked about doing the Piss Fetish project for like 2 years before I actually did it, and I recorded a bunch of shit in my computer, and it felt good to do. Like, there's a catharsis in untamed, unmanageable noise. Like, I put out this like fucking. It's, in retrospect, it's awful, but it was my first like attempt at doing something that was just like pure. Everything's covered in distortion, aggressive bullshit. I'm not going to say what it is because it's terrible and I don't want anyone to listen to it. And I'll probably take it down after this conversation. But I like attempted it, and then I was like, oh, I could take this to the nth degree and call it Piss Fetish, and that would be funny. And everybody was like, oh yeah, it would be fucking. Oh, you're so quirky. And I like joked around about it for a while, and then this past January, I finally decided like I'm gonna make my contribution to the thing, and I set up some stuff, and I just fucking went for it and was like, this is gonna be the demo. And that demo is still my most listened to thing on Bandcamp, which is shocking because comparatively to my, I know I can't say later because it hasn't even been a fucking year, but like compared to the stuff that I did afterwards, it's not that fun. Like, I really was just kind of winging it at the end of the day. I think if you have an idea, ultimately, you should just fucking do it. Make art for the sake of art. Do it. There's nothing stopping you from making your contribution to the thing at the end of the day. And it fires me up when people say, like, I couldn't write, I couldn't do something that you haven't already heard. And it's like, I don't fucking care. I want to hear you do it. I don't want to be the one that has to have other people listen to my stuff. I want to listen to your stuff. That's what I really, truly want at the end of the day. So if you're sitting at home thinking that you like don't have anything to do, or like, oh, whatever, I can't contribute anything, first of all, go fuck yourself. You're not that important that anything that you do is fucking gonna blow up in the first place. I'm sorry, it takes a lot of hard work, and it's gotta be super fucking good. Also, I love you, and you should just fucking do it. Get on your laptop, download Reaper, just fucking use the free version of it. It doesn't matter. You'll be fucking fine. Get 3 plugins and put out a noise album. I fucking challenge you to do it. Please do it. I love that this is a thing that's so accessible for everybody at the end of the day, and I want to know what you can do with it, because I know what I can do with it, and I know what my ideas are, because I have to live in my head, which is both unfortunate and a miracle. So please do it.
All right, everybody who is listening to this right now, you have officially been challenged. And this is actually probably the perfect point and the perfect time to broadcast the fact that on your screens right now, you will see the submissions email for this show. So I implore everybody, and I'm sure that Audrey is actually kind of threatening you. She will find you if you don't do this. But everybody listening, do exactly what Audrey just said. Fucking make your shit. Send it to me. I will fucking play it on this show every time. Just do it. Just fucking do it. And I really do like that entire idea, and I think that's the way that people need to be viewing music as a whole. Like, I think we kind of got away from that first point, but I'm very, very glad that you did. But I think that like the biggest change that people can make to the way that they think about music is to simply say the greatest music that has ever happened has not happened yet. And we need to throw as much at the wall as we can to continue even if you know that what you're going to make is trash, fucking make it. Because best case Ontario, it's going to be something wonderful. Worst case Ontario, it's just another project that fosters the idea that somebody else thinks, you know, I could do this too.
I love Trailer Park Boys. Hell yeah. I think that like
I forget that a lot of like people that I know up here, we actually just say that.
oh no, I'm the bad one. The guitar player in one of the bands I'm kind of in is Canadian, so like I'm super hip to
Oh, dude,
uh
it's a huge Canadianism. Worst case
yeah.
Ontario, and I'm sure that's where it came from. But I also have to imagine that the writers of Trailer Park Boys got that from somewhere as well.
I love it. Any way you cut it, big ups Canada for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think if you're gonna make art, just fucking do it. Like Paul McCartney didn't sit down and be like, "Oh, what? I mean, what are we gonna do?" Elvis was a thing. He was like, "Fuck, do it." Like I'm gonna hang out with John Lennon and write some cool shit. Like I'm not saying their character is good. That's not what I'm saying. I know they're problematic, but like you have to just do it. Trent Reznor sat up in Cleveland and made Pretty Hate Machine on like an emu, some bullshit sequencer, and just fucking did it. Like, what is stopping you from doing that with a computer that you have, or you have GarageBand on your phone if you have an iPhone, and it's not bad.
It's the amount of accessibility now, which is insane. How counterintuitive it is that when things were much less accessible to create art with is the era where people place the best music coming from purely because of what rose to the top. But now that it's as easy as literally just putting GarageBand on your phone and having recording technology that people had wet dreams about in the 70s, people aren't doing it, or people think that music from this time is worse or not even music apparently.
Yeah, I mean, think of like, okay, so if you really want to have an argument that things were of a higher quality back in the day, I mean, if you're into like punk rock at all, that's like kind of the best example of stuff that has like really popular stuff and then stuff that like nobody knows about, and it's astonishing that nobody knows about it. It's like as broad as it is long at the end of the day. And like some of that shit just fucking slaps at the end of the day. Like when people think punk rock, they think like the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Ramones and shit. And it's like you are missing out on so much good shit. And that's so if that's the highest like echelon of where punk rock music is that I wouldn't want any part of it.
No, never.
We would never have power violence, which is one of my favorite genres. If we were just like everything's got to sound like God Save the Queen, guys. That's the mold. Or Blitzkrieg Bop, and it's like, oh my god, like other people at some point had to decide that they wanted to like turn it up to the next notch. Like we wouldn't have like I mean, there's just so many examples of people just like cranking up the heat, and people are still cranking up the heat. That's the thing. It's just in different ways. Like I think hyperpop is a great fusion of things that's like very interesting. Do I listen to it very frequently? Admittedly, not really. It's not totally my thing, but I'm also like I want to hear a black metal album from a 16-year-old in his bedroom that's terrible. Like that's more my speed of things. Now, I love rap and hip hop. Like Cemetery out of California is like one of the coolest things that's happening right now. This kid sat down at his computer, made what is effectively a Lil Peep track, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in like the best way. And then he was like, I'm gonna run this through an assload of distortion. And I'm so here for it. Like I use bonkers shit and I will probably love it. Turn up the heat, please.
Well, and it's interesting because I introduced my brother to 100 gex, and there was a part of his brain that kind of like didn't quite process what was happening, because when it comes to music, he is the complete opposite of the way that, not the way that I view it, but in his approach. Mine is obviously noise, and his is very systematic and like, very technical, I guess.
Yeah.
And when I showed him 100 gecs, his brain kind of like broke a bit, and then he realized what was happening, and he was like, these guys are doing everything so intentionally and belligerently wrong that I can't stop listening to this.
When I first heard Cemetery, that's the first that was my initial reaction, because like I remember I showed my partner at the time, and they were like, this is awful, and I was like, no, you don't understand the point here. What he's doing is all of the things that will never get you played on the radio, and it's almost, it's not even like bad fundamentally, it's just like making all these very particular choices that just like we don't normally interact with. You don't normally have like an entire track caked in distortion. That's not normally the case. Like vocals, samples, 808s, all. And I adore that sort of approach. I love that. Like I get where he's coming from with his brain breaking a little bit, because that happens to me sometimes, where I like the first time I heard Perpetual Black Second by Meshuggah, my brain broke a little bit, because like the polyrhythms and just like the gain on the guitars is a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, this is like crazy. I mean, that was a while ago. That's been a long time. But I love having I love that people will take the threshold and just break it. Like, please do that. Please do something that's just ignorant. What a good work.
I think a really good way to put it is like, if you have like honestly, in continuing on with the challenge that you're posing to everybody, whatever you think about modern music, whatever problem or whatever complaint you have, start there. Start with, I think today's music sucks because all it does is blank. Take that and fix it. If you have this complaint, fix it. Make what you would want to hear, make the best version of that you have your complaint about, and fucking make it. Because if your opinion is as important as you seem to think that it is, then everybody should fucking love it.
There should be nothing holding you back if you have the best idea. Yeah, like, absolutely. That would weed you out from so many people that are doing clone projects. There's nothing wrong with a clone project. Some of my favorite projects are clone projects. But, like, come on, please, make your thing.
Yeah, and, and I also think that there's something to be said for mistaking entertainment for actual music.
I agree there. Yeah, I mean, there's layers to that argument as well, where, I mean, like, we could spend all day disassembling pop music and putting it back together.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
I have a lot of opinions on that, and I love pop music. I was in a pop band for a long while. Like, I really enjoy the platform of very good songwriting that's, like, has interesting instrumentation and stuff. I really like that stuff. But, I mean, to brazenly say that, like, all of X is bad is just, like, deep down, everybody knows that's not true. Like, not all of one genre is bad.
It's an excuse not to
so,
think.
Like, yeah, it's an excuse not to engage with it, or you're racist or something. Like, there's something there.
It says more about you than it does the genre that you're complaining about.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? I I would like to think that in a way, because in a way, in our conversation today, we really haven't. Also, while we've been speaking, I made sure to go download your demo so you can't yank it from under my feet.
I'm not gonna take down any piss fetish stuff. I'm still proud of all of it. I appreciate that. It's a good time. It's a good little demo. And if you compare that to like Gouge, which is more of like a thought through release, I think the snapshot of both pieces is very interesting to juxtapose. So yeah, I don't think that's bad. I'm more than happy to proudly present all of that stuff because I mean they're just snapshots of where I'm at any given time and like what I'm interested in and what are you supposed to be is like the most graphic cover I've done with like the most aggressive title and it's really a pretty calm wall like
Yeah.
it's very intentional and so yeah I'm very proud of all that stuff.
I just didn't want you to yank it out from under me there.
I will promise for the record that I will never do that. And to answer the inevitable, do you have a piss fetish question? No.
I did ask you that in our lead up conversations before we actually got on the horn today. So, but I mean,
I'm having fun with that now.
But that's good, right? Like I don't sniff glue. I don't. It's weird. Who would do such a thing? But you know, it's just it's a moniker, and everyone's gonna wonder. But I will say that I think we've had a really good discussion here today because there is a lot more to noise than the aggressive sound that you're hearing. And I really like a lot of what you've said and how it relates to what people's opinions and philosophies on art and music should be in general. Not should be, but what they can be, I think, is what we mean here. So I think before we sort of wrap this up, do you think there's anything that you haven't covered, or is there anything anything burning on the mind or the heart that you want to get out before we close this up?
I mean, I could talk about like gear for like 40 years, but like I don't know. I think like if anybody has any apprehension about like I know I got all aggressive and I said make art, and I know that some people might be like, well, that will cost me X amount of dollars. So I guess as an addendum to my little brief challenge, Behringer makes an HM2 clone that's $25 in the US. I admittedly don't know what it is everywhere else offhand. It's $20 or $25 here. You can buy a 6-channel mixer for like $40, and if you get that, a microphone, and the cables that you need for it, you can make an interesting harsh noise album. I promise you. Those are things that are vital.
I'll even, you know what? I'll even say that you can strip it down more than that. You can take one USB microphone and record a bunch of like live action noises and stuff around your house into Audacity, which is free, and then crank your fucking gain and distortion on that.
Touche. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. I think that people will like argue about the gear thing and be like, yeah, you need like an ST404 and like you need like fucking all this extra bullshit, and it's like you don't need what's the Lyria thing that everybody's using now, that like synth from like
I can't remember the name.
Eastern Europe or whatever. Like it's like $900, and that's sick if you can swing it, and like how fucking cool. But like you don't need that. I recorded my demo with a $20 guitar amp that I've had since I was 10.
Actually,
and pedals that I had from playing guitar.
Yeah, and you know what? I just because I promised him I would do this at some point. Justin, if you're listening to this, your mod rig or your mod synth rig, it's sick, but you don't have to do that. You're a fucking lunatic. That's just for my best friend Justin. He has this gigantic mod synth that he has dropped way too much money into, and it's one of the dopest things I've ever seen. But when people see that and they think that's what they need to do noise, that is it's so incorrect. He is the most excessive person in the world when it comes to that shit. He's the complete opposite. I
totally get it.
The complete opposite ends of the spectrum from a USB mic and Audacity. This is like the most hi-fi, like, audiophile levels of shit for fucking noise, which is the best thing ever. The fact that he spent so much time and money on making this beautiful, high-tech, carefully thought-out box to make noise, oh, it's beautiful.
A true student of the art form is what I would call that.
Truly.
I know. Okay, not to like reference a bunch of other bullshit, but like there's that interview with Sam McKinley from the Rita from White Centipede Noise, where he's like, yeah, I decided I was gonna devote my life to this or whatever, is like hella cool. And like I think that if I also am like a total gear slut at the end of the day. Like I have something in the mail like probably once a week at this point because I just keep accruing shit because I don't drink or like do anything. So I have that's what I spend my extra funds on. Hell yeah, there's totally room for that. Those guys from Terror Cell Unit use a bunch of crazy ass gear and it's fucking so cool. But that's not to say that you need all that stuff. Like I don't want anyone to think that you need to like shell out all your money on this. Like that's not the point. If you put out an interesting wall and you have a good I mean, like I always love a political slant, even if it's something where it's like just queer commentary or something. Like just fucking do it. Your idea is probably neat. Humans are super creative. You don't need all the modular stuff. It's not $20,000 to do this. It doesn't have to be.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Exactly. I just love it. I love gear. I've always loved gear. I'm an ex-Guitar Center and Sam Ash employee. Like, I've always loved gear and been super into it, and I'm nerdy about it, and I can tell you what chips are in pedals and bullshit. Great, but it doesn't equal... I mean, like, blues dads will buy, like, $40,000 worth of garbage to play pentatonic bullshit scales over Led Zeppelin. Fuck you.
I think that is probably the perfect note to end this conversation on. Just perfect. So yeah, Audrey, thanks a lot for coming on. This has been an absolute blast, and I really think that you've given the people listening, if there is anyone listening, there probably isn't, but if they are, and this reaches at least one person, know that Piss Fetish has challenged you for a very good reason.
It's because I love you, and I love art, and I love humans, and I think that we're beautiful creatures, and your voice matters unless you are a Nazi or some shit. Your voice matters. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for sitting down with me across the internet, and yeah, take care, man.
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
All right, and that was my conversation with Audrey Trench, recording under the moniker Piss Fetish. So now we're going to listen to her album, The Cutting Room Floor, Volume 1. So here's that. everyone. Thank you all so much for listening to noise music that you can punch walls and fight cops to. My name is Gluexsniffer, and this episode has been featuring PISS Fetish, otherwise known as Audrey Trench. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.